Blessings, beloveds, star blessings and Venus blessings for 2023. So we're going to talk about the full moon in Cancer, which is coming up tomorrow. And before I talk about it, I just want to say a couple of things. I was just thinking while I was actually getting ready to sit down and present this information to you guys, I was thinking, yeah, it's a full moon in Cancer. It's the first full moon for 2023. So we're kind of launching, into 2023 with quite an intense moon. Now, the most common things that people say, oh, it's in Cancer, it's nurturing, it's a sensitive, nurturing moon, it's time to nurture ourselves and blah, blah, blah. I find that really, really boring when I hear all that stuff. So I'm going to try and bring a bit of a different edge to the way I present it, which is what I generally try to do anyway, because I think a little bit differently. Then I was thinking about, well, what are we doing with, every moon cycle, every lunation cycle, the new moon, the full moon? The most common thing again is it's a new moon, it's time to set your intentions, the full moon is the illumination process, etc. Those are very, very basic and correct statements about the lunation cycle. But really, the moon is so embedded in our egoic structure. It's how we are projecting ourselves, right? From an evolutionary perspective, at least. So Pluto is the soul. The soul needs a vehicle to move through, to live its life experiences through, to meet its karmic debts, to evolve and so forth. And the moon is the vehicle that the soul projects through in order to have an identity. So the moon in Cancer, one of the reasons it's such a volatile, sensitive moon, is because it's in Cancer. It is its rulership position. And people often assume that because it's in rulership, that it's, the strongest place for the moon and the best place for the moon. And it's not necessarily the case. It's not about saying it's the best or the worst. It's just really about understanding just how volatile and sensitive a moon in Cancer is, particularly from the point of view of Pluto, the infinite consciousness of who you are, using a vehicle to project itself. When we are projecting ourselves, we are projecting a particular identity, right? In order to understand who we are and move through this physical dimension. So it's a very, very volatile moon, right? Moon in Cancer. It has some great aspects to it, and it also has, a couple of challenging things to it as well, which I'll unpack in a minute. But I was thinking about, the full moon, but what are we doing with this energy? What we are doing is we are living a story that we are either identifying with, projecting, or telling ourselves. Astrology is storytelling as well. When you go deep into the myths, the mythology, which is a fundamental building block to enrich your practice and understanding of astrology, is to really have at least a basic grasp of the myths, right? Because the myths tell us all the beautiful stories of all the archetypes in which we all are an expression of. So we're storytelling, we're weaving into a story as we are dancing with the moon, with the lunar goddess, and she's a vehicle for us to express ourselves, right? And the archetypes, which is a beautiful level of teachings in astrology as well, and fundamental to your understanding in astrology, we are the living and breathing embodiment of all the archetypes in different ways, to different lengths, and so on and so forth. But we are who we are essentially from that point of view of our personality and our egoic structure and how we are expressing and projecting through that, which is largely the sun and the moon. And the soul, Pluto, is the driving force behind it. But we are those living archetypes, whether we are conscious of it or not, aware of it or not. And you just need to look around. If you understand the archetypes, in this case, I'm specifically referring to the 12 zodiac signs, the wheel of the zodiac. Each archetype, each sign has numerous levels and layers to it because it depends, which lens you are looking through. But, just very simply put, and I'm going to phrase it in this way, but it doesn't mean, I'm going to use the word nothing just as a way to communicate and express and emphasize the point I'm trying to make. So Aries is nothing without a challenge or a risk. Taurus is nothing without money. Gemini is nothing without an idea. Cancer is nothing without a family. Leo is nothing without an audience. Virgo is nothing without a job. Libra is nothing without a relationship. Scorpio is nothing without a secret and a crisis. Sagittarius is nothing without a philosophical orientation to life. Capricorn is nothing without a social identity and profession, career. Aquarius is nothing without friends and visions. Pisces is nothing without a dream. These are very simple keywords, right? But literally, if you look around and you look at the people that you do know, if you are able to look closely and objectively enough, you will see that those statements are fundamentally true about the individual. Of course, that doesn't encapsulate the entirety of any person, but they're simple and obvious attributes of what we're made up of. So with the moon in Cancer, we have this process and journey. Now the moon in Cancer is a collective thing, so everyone's going to experience that, right? Some people might be having a lunar return because they've got their moon in Cancer, so it amplifies that, natal position of the moon, for instance. But the moon in Cancer, well, first of all, let's back up. Where did it begin? It began at the new moon in Capricorn, late December. So we're in a new year, as in not the true new year, because the true new year starts on the 21st of March when the sun is at 0 degrees of Aries. That is the true new year. This fabricated New Year's Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, New Year that we are sort of thrown into from that consensus state is just a made up consensus version of the beginning of the new year. But if you're a true astrologer, you will understand that the true new year is on the 21st of March. In any case, it feels as though we've stepped into a new year, right? 2023. And this year is is going to be pretty challenging, I think. And if we understand the archetypes and the cycles and the planets moving and ingressing into different signs and the nodes changing signs, then we can understand that, yes, we've got a pretty challenging journey ahead of us. It's not going to be very easy. First of all, the nodes are transitioning from Taurus and Scorpio into Libra and Aries. An interesting axis, that one, interesting polarity, and I will come back, down the track to talk about that in greater depth. But those nodes will ultimately form a square to Pluto, and that's a big deal. In evolutionary terms, that's a really big deal. When you are looking at an astrological birth chart and you're looking at, a particular soul or yourself, your own chart, in EA, we always bring into the understanding of the soul's evolutionary path in conjunction with the nodes. The nodes are just such an important component of our evolution, where we've come from, what we've brought in, and what we are essentially integrating towards. And so the same principle applies from a collective perspective when we have Pluto aspecting the nodes, in this case squaring the nodes. This is going to be a pretty testing, challenging year, I would think, just based on that. Saturn is going to ingress into Pisces. That's a really weird combination of energies. They are the complete, sort of antithesis of each other. I'll come back and talk about all that in in due time. But I just want us to kind of be aware of what we are sort of heading towards. Now, going to this full moon, let me just share my screen and bring up the chart for this full moon. So here it is. Here, this is based for Melbourne, Australia. So clearly, never mind the position of where everything is, you will look at a chart for your own location if you wanted to actually look at the chart for the full moon. But as always, the most personalized thing to work with is, well, where is this full moon in my own chart? And as I said, where did this cycle begin? It began in Capricorn, early degrees of Capricorn, late December. This moon in Cancer is a part of that cycle, which was at the end of 2022, and it's bringing us into the so-called beginning of 2023. Now, the aspects to this full moon are really interesting, and here's my take on it. First of all, we have Pallas Athena conjunct the full moon, and I actually really love this particular goddess being in this position with this full moon. I think that's going to be very, very helpful, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Chiron is forming a T-square, okay, to this full moon, and that's a really super important aspect. It's a T-square. It's a very powerful, what's the word? Aspect pattern. Thank you, aspect pattern. Venus has ingressed into Capricorn. I want to come back and talk about Venus in Capricorn, perhaps in another video, because I have quite a bit to say about that, and I don't want to jam it all into this full moon video. So I'll leave that. But I noticed when she ingressed into Aquarius just a couple of days ago, I always notice Venus, period, and specifically because she's just over my ascendant, so I can feel her energy very, very strongly. I always do anyway, but that conjunction she had to Pluto for a few days there, towards the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, for me personally, it was really super, super dark and intense. It's the divine feminine taking us into the dark feminine, Venus Pluto. I'm a Venus Pluto native, so I resonate with that energy anyway within myself. But when it comes up as a transit, it kind of pulls me into that energy, that portal, in a very profound way. And that all happens for me in my 12th house, because I've got Capricorn in my 12th house. So I'm glad she's moved on, is what I'm trying to get at. And in Aquarius, although, both Aquarius and Capricorn are both Saturn ruled signs in traditional astrology. However, Aquarius is also ruled by Uranus, and I always look at both rulerships. I don't just stick to the traditional rulership system, because I think we're missing so much if we don't apply the outer planets and their associated rulerships to the signs. And Uranus is certainly an important planet when it comes to Venus in Aquarius. So is Saturn, but you cannot exclude Uranus. So anyway, I'll come back and talk about Venus. Now, Mercury is conjunct the Sun, retrograde in Capricorn. So Mercury is actually opposite the full moon and opposite Pallas Athena. This is a really interesting combination. First of all, and just another aspect, a couple more actually before I go into just a few comments about each. Uranus is sextile the full moon and trine the Sun, right? Which is beautiful. I'm so grateful that Uranus is forming these aspects to this lunation cycle. It's very helpful, particularly if you are, well, I'll get to that in a minute. I want to come back and talk about the importance of Uranus and Chiron with this full moon, because it's super important. But I just want to start off with Pallas Athena. Now, Pallas Athena is a representation or a symbol of wisdom. And she's the daughter of Zeus, Jupiter, and was born out of his head. the greatest description I've ever heard of her, which came from my mentor, from a astrological seminar that he attended like 30 years ago, something like that. And I'll never forget this, when he told me this, because I've never seen it written in any books, including in Dimitri George's books. She may articulate a meaning of Pallas Athena that corresponds to what I'm about to say, but she didn't use this exact phrase, is all I'm saying. And I think it's the best expression of understanding just how powerful Pallas Athena is and what she truly represents. So the expression was, Pallas Athena is literally the removal of all projections, and hence her ability to have clear seeing. And that's not something you'll get in commercial astrology, YouTube videos, blah, 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 right? And basic books. You will not get that same line. And it's fundamentally true. She's an objective goddess. She's not emotional and sensitive and clingy and, all the things that Cancer kind of represents, right? So in Cancer, she's a bit of a contradiction, if you like, from the point of view of Cancer and Pallas Athena are just entirely different archetypes. But in any case, she is in Cancer because she has to transit through the entire zodiac, just like every other single body does. So in Cancer, because she's the symbol of wisdom, and because she's the symbol of clear seeing and the removal of projections. Think about that, the removal of projections. What does that mean? When we are projecting things, we are seeing things from a very subjective point of view. She's the representation of objective wisdom. So she gives us that ability to remove those subjective projections in order to be able to see clearly, to see ourselves clearly, and to see our reality clearly. So she's really powerful here with this full moon. Now the intelligence, because she also corresponds to high intelligence, goddess of wisdom, right? Right brain, intuition, etc. The intelligence she's bringing to us through this conjunction to the full moon is emotional intelligence, because it's in Cancer. So there's something very beautiful opening up for us from the point of view of our emotional center, Cancer, our sense of security and so forth, our identity, what we are projecting, what identity we are projecting, what are we projecting out into the world, and our emotional attachment or connection to any of those things, to ourselves, to others, to reality, etc. Well, Pallas Athena offers the gift of clear seeing, the removal of projections. So she brings in emotional intelligence and wisdom so that we can see clearly what storyline we are feeding into, we are embodying, we are expressing and living through this full moon. And again, do not forget, it started in Capricorn. It's really important. Now, one other thing about a full moon, and I will continue to say this because I never hear anybody else say it, and I think it's just absolutely important to remember. People often associate the full moon as the point of culmination of what began at the new moon cycle. And whilst that has a deep element of truth to it, the full moon is also a period, a time where we may begin something entirely new. And it's logical when you think about it. Why is it logical, and why is it the case that we can start something new? Because during the full moon, it's like you've got a flashlight, a bright light on the circumstances around you in your life. And when you've got that light on there, when you shine the light on something, you can see it for what it is. So through this process of illumination and seeing, you may make particular adjustments or decisions based on what you are seeing. Therefore saying, okay, well, I don't want to participate in this anymore. I don't want to further develop this anymore. I want to actually start something completely different. That's called a new beginning. It's not often something you hear when it comes to the full moon, but it's there. It's part of the full moon. So wisdom emotional intelligence through Pallas Athena. Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, he's about halfway through his cycle at the moment. So he's conjunct the sun, opposite Pallas Athena and opposite the full moon. So there's a strong component of left brain, right brain, Mercury left brain, Pallas Athena right brain. Mercury is retrograde, so that means that the mental processes of everything that we are reflecting on mentally, has a deeper sort of right brain component to it, we could say. Mercury retrograde dives very, very deep, and it has that ability to step outside the consensus reality, which is Capricorn, and think about things quite differently, reflect on things in a very different way to what it normally would when it's actually moving direct, you could say. It just goes deeper into our own psychic structures, we could say. So Mercury is retrograde, and because of that, during this full moon, there is something there that's playing out relative to what we are thinking about in terms of this reality that we are projecting outside of ourselves, what we are seeing all around us, how we are relating to that, the thoughts that we are having about that. And there's a process of just chill, just wait. Don't be in a hurry to launch too quickly into things. And we must also bring into that, Cancer is such a subjective sign. It's one of the most subjective signs, and it's so emotional, so sensitive. When you are completely subjective and completely emotional about a matter, you can't be objective and clear about it, can you? It's impossible. That's why Pallas Athena here is a powerful goddess of assistance with this full moon, because she brings in the wisdom that we need to have some clear seeing. Chiron squaring this full moon is really important, really, really important. And it's a bit of a sore point. Chiron is always a sore point. Chiron is such a complex archetypal figure. He has so many dimensions to him. And in order to embrace the journey of where Chiron is leading each of us to, our own personal journey with Chiron, we always need to somehow deal with our pain, our suffering, and our wounds. We have to find ways to heal, right, those deeper inner wounds, which is what Chiron essentially reflects. So it's squaring this full moon, and Uranus is sextile the full moon. Now, this is really interesting because if you go into the mythology of Chiron and Uranus, they are completely connected in their storyline. And if you think about the process of evolution, to get to really embodying the nature of Uranus, which is being liberated, right? Being free, being completely authentic with who you are, and not feeling weighed down and worried and controlled by what's expected of you relative to consensus reality systems. You found a way to actually be true to yourself, right? That's Uranus. But remember, Chiron is the rainbow bridge, and when you look at the order of the planets, to get to Uranus, you've got to go through Chiron's cave. I've said this before many times. So this full moon is showing us that relative to our projected perceived identity, moon in Cancer, what's being illuminated in our own consciousness at the moment, our emotional identity and responses to that, we need to work on whatever Chiron trigger may arise during this time. And Uranus being sextile and sextile the moon, trine the sun, is saying if you can address the Chironic issue or theme that might be pronounced during this time, then Uranus gives us that opportunity. Sextiles are opportunities. Trine aspects are generally break from the universe, energies that flow and assist and support the direction we are attempting to evolve into or embody. So Uranus here is saying, deal with your wound, right? Deal with whatever is triggered. And when you do, I'm here to assist you so that you can feel a greater sense of true liberation and authenticity within yourself. That's what this little pattern here is really speaking to, from my perspective and my understanding. So it's a quite a volatile full moon. And the other matter is, of course, that Pluto's in the picture as well. And you're not going to hear many people talking about it. I almost guarantee you that. Most people will just focus on Mercury. They won't even bring in Pallas Athena. A lot of people will bring in Uranus for sure, and some people won't even bring in Chiron. And if you understand who Chiron was and who Uranus, Prometheus was or is, you cannot ignore the fact that these two bodies are completely synced into this full moon. And one is saying, deal with what is triggered inside you, as painful as it may be. And I will gift you a true sense of liberation and freedom within yourself so that you can express yourself totally authentically without fear of being judged, without fear of being excluded. Now, Pluto, this is why this moon is just so volatile. Quite apart from the fact that it's in Cancer, it's opposite Pluto as well, and the Sun's conjunct Pluto. So it's a deeply transformative lunation cycle, full moon, offering us the opportunity to purge, to release a lot of things that have kept us constrained and conditioned, Capricorn, and matters of the past, Cancer. It's releasing old storylines that basically don't fit with where you have arrived in your path at this point. It's the release and purging of that. But with Pluto, as we know, when Pluto comes knocking on the door, you know, there's always, well, there's a lot of things, but there's certainly a sense of something really needs to be completed and finished. Something needs to die, as it were. We can't have the experience of Pluto without transforming something about ourselves. It could be an idea, an emotional attachment, you know, whatever it is. But Pluto moon aspects, generally speaking, are a really intense and challenging aspect because Pluto scares the shit out of the moon. It's such an overpowering force to the moon. The moon, even without it being in Cancer, is fundamentally about it having a sense of safety and security. So Pluto threatens any sense of safety and security. And it does it, though, for good reason, because it's essentially trying to assist growth and evolution from that deep emotional level of security so that you can not be so, perhaps, how can I put it? I guess the best way to put it is to say that it's emotional transformation and growth so that you can feel a deeper sense of security within yourself that's not, you know, attached and linked into and codependent on other things, on things outside of you, including family. You know, we have so many attachments in so many ways to family, to friends, to jobs, to money, to sex, to whatever. But any of those things that we are attached to that involve something or someone else is always subject to change or finish. the only thing that we can truly trust and continue with in our own process of growth and development and evolution is our own self. That too is always changing, but the relationship we have to that is something that we have complete responsibility and freedom about. We don't have freedom and control about what's happening out there, what's happening to Joe, what's happening to whomever. But whatever's happening inside us, we do have some control over that. Not in a personality way. I'm not speaking like that. I'm speaking more from that soul level in directing our path, lining the personality with the soul. That's what we are doing, consciously or unconsciously, because Pluto is always the driver. So this full moon is super intense, in my opinion. It will be a very volatile experience for many people. Some people, they may just pass through it and not much happens. And that is an important point, because why is that the case, that some people have, breezed through a full moon that appears to be quite sensitive and volatile and explosive and intense? Some people breeze through a Pluto transit that usually is the catalyst for completely changing somebody's life. And my answer to that is simply this. When you, this is again from an evolutionary perspective, when you operate in that consensus reality, there's this density to your existence. So it's kind of that the density is such that nothing can penetrate through that. So people can just plod along and go along with their consensus reality life. And for the most part, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, there doesn't seem to be much turbulence and much going on, because there's that density is ruled by Saturn. Saturn rules density, walls, structures, boundaries. So it's just an interesting thing to think about, because it is a question that comes up in people's minds when you are observing people's lives and things that are happening in their chart, for instance, and you think, oh, wow, they just breezed through that Pluto conjunct their Sun transit. I wonder why. Well, that's part of the reason. It's far more complex than that, but that's a fundamental baseline as to why that occurs. So in other words, for those of us that are evolving with being somewhat conscious about our evolutionary path, we are tackling a lot more. We're dealing with a lot more, because we don't have this density as a wall blocking things from coming into our sphere. So spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, we are dealing with a lot more. And for that reason, we will also be a lot more sensitive to things as well. Just an important note to perhaps think about, if you like. Okay, so let's see. They're the main sort of takeaways with this full moon in Cancer. And I think I'll leave it there, because I didn't want to make this video too long. But, in summary, once again, I would say that, Pallas Athena's presence is vital here from the point of view of integrating and embodying deep emotional wisdom through her presence, because the moon in Cancer opposite Pluto can be a very explosive experience inwardly and or projected outside of ourselves, because it is an opposition, Pluto opposite moon. So the moon is threatened by Pluto fundamentally, okay, at that psychological level, unconscious psychological level. Pluto rules the unconscious. So the moon in Cancer, which is so vulnerable, it's so beautiful. You know, the moon in Cancer really brings some beautiful aspects relative to deep, rich imagination, creativity. Again, not things you often hear about Cancer. The most obvious things you hear is sensitive, emotional, moody, family, protective, da 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 da. But Cancer is actually one of the most imaginative signs out of the entire zodiac. The richest imagination, incredible. So there are those layers to it as well, of course, but it, you know, just depends on who you are and where does this full moon land in your chart? What is it activating? What is it connecting to? Where did the new moon cycle begin? I think, you know, on a collective sphere, there's going to be a lot of emotional projection and outpour in a lot of different ways. And it's going to be fucking intense because Pluto is right opposite it. There's no two ways about it. And Chiron's there as well. And Chiron, you know, will, you'll see something in the news about family, some, you know, some dark sort of things coming out about certain families, and that side of it won't be nice. But I don't like to focus on that too much because what's happening out there is happening out there. What's more important is what's happening in here and how we are responding to that, relating to that, how we are perceiving that, and therefore the subsequent perhaps choices or thoughts we have as a result of that moving forward. So it is a powerful, intense full moon for being launched into 2023. And to me, it kind of, it's almost like it's saying, get ready, because 2023 is going to be pretty intense. And this emotional Cancerian full moon opposite Pluto is kind of making the mark, setting the tone, if you like, for what's coming up. Saturn's going to go into Pisces. You know, that's really interesting. Just further to releasing old emotional stories and identities and karmic imprints and so forth, the new moon is also trine the South Node. The South Node is the collective past, and of course it's also sextile the North Node, right? So the fact that it's trine the South Node is it's suggesting that there is a sense of no resistance being offered, you know, on the table for us to release old emotional attachments, Scorpio, and moon in Cancer, identities, projected identities, that have just served their time. There's nothing wrong with anything that has happened in our life. It's only the mind that makes it right or wrong. Everything that has appeared in our life has appeared as a catalyst for our growth. Whether we like it or whether we don't doesn't really matter. And every transit is always offering an opportunity to become more conscious. The difficult transits are difficult, and the more pleasant ones, yes, are more pleasant. But it's not, I mean, looking at things in that way is just from that dual perspective of that was shit, this is great. But when we bring in more awareness and consciousness, and we take a position where we can just be more objective and observe rather than identifying all the time, that neutral sort of space produces something that, what's the word? No resistance. That's probably the best word. Because when we see something we don't like, bang, that's resistance immediately. But when you see something that, sure, you can identify that it's not really my liking, but you're not forming an attachment and you're not resisting it. The way to figure that out is You're not judging it, you're just observing it. That's the distinction between identifying and attaching to something and projecting on it versus observing it, noticing it, and just moving on from it. Okay, I think I will leave it here. So, see you guys soon with Venus in Cancer. What did I just say? Venus in Cancer? Venus in Aquarius. I've got Cancer in my head because it's a full moon in Cancer. Venus in Aquarius and so much more, of course, because the nodes are changing positions. We've got all these eclipses coming up. Pluto's going into Aquarius. Saturn's going into Pisces. You know, it's a really big year, I think. Not that the last 3 years, for instance, haven't been, and certainly not the last 15 years of my own life haven't been, which now reminds me, I just want to say, hopefully you've stayed all the way through to hear this, the Pluto webinar, I believe I'll be doing it around the 22nd of January, and I did send out a group email and some emails bounced back. So if you didn't get an email from me about that, although it doesn't have all the information in it, I'm going to send another email soon, which will have some information, times, dates, etc. In the next few days, week, around there. If you didn't receive an email about a week ago, then please email me again, because some emails bounced back. I don't know why they did. And in the last few days, I have had a few emails from people that were not included in that group email because they are, you know, you just, whoever you are, you've just heard about the Pluto webinar that I'm putting together and you've emailed me. So I will get back to you. It'll just be one group email to everybody, right? Just outlining the date and time, etc. But if you haven't heard from me from a week ago, please email me and express your interest, because as I said, some emails bounce back. And I'm really looking forward to this webinar. I've been working on it now for a little while, and I'm about halfway there of what I am putting together with it. It's actually quite a cathartic and intense and personal journey for me as I'm putting this together, because I'm speaking through lived experience of the last 15 years, as well as my astrological understanding of, 26 years or whatever it's been now, this lifetime. So I'm really putting my heart and soul in this, which I do with anything I do anyway, relative to astrology especially. But this is a really personal offering that is going to be very, very powerful once you hear what I have to say. So you won't be disappointed. I'm pretty confident with that. So I'll see you guys very, very soon. Take it easy during this full moon in Cancer. It is, as I said, quite a sensitive one. And use, or rather tune into Pallas Athena. Minerva is her Roman name, by the way. I've got a statue of her actually. She's, I think all the goddesses and the gods for that matter, they are all incredible really within their own right and what they represent. But I think when you really want to work with a particular archetype, which is already kind of inside you, if you like, invoking the energy of that archetype, in this case Pallas Athena, by envisioning, visualizing, saying a prayer or a mantra or an affirmation or whatever it may be, in order to invoke the energy and the presence of that particular goddess, is a very effective and powerful way, particularly, if you're a really sort of really into the full moon, the new moon cycles, because some people are just, so into that lunation cycle, and I can completely understand. It's such an interesting unfoldment to observe. But some people do, rituals during full moons and new moons and things like that. And if you're one of those people, or even if you're not, really envisioning Pallas Athena, emotional wisdom, clear seeing, Uranus in a sextile and trine aspect to this full moon, basically saying, here's the opportunity and a sense of the ability to step into a space where there's no resistance to you actually feeling more truthful to who you are. Uranus is the liberator, period. But again, Chiron is there, and it's suggesting that something might be triggered or activated that is painful or uncomfortable. And it's, likely to come through perhaps family situations or just our own emotional state, Cancer, our own, the identity that we have, the projected identity that we have. And Chiron is forming a T-square. So it's saying, hey, there's something possibly deeply painful here that might be activated for you. But how you perceive it, how you approach it, is going to be the key to working through it in a way where there'll be some integration as opposed to resistance. Mars in Gemini retrograde has been a freaking nightmare, to be quite honest. I've had some really bizarre things happen in my neighborhood, including somebody smashing into 6 cars, one at a time, deliberately. Yeah, some really interesting things. I mean, that's kind of minor, really, compared to what's been vocalized, projected, transmitted through people's vocal cords and their left brain, Gemini, through Mars, shooting fucking arrows and blood everywhere. It's really, I would have to say, in all my years of being awake to astrology this lifetime, I've never seen Mars in Gemini retrograde behave through, well, Mars isn't doing it, but, as above, so below, the energy that it's emanating and how people are responding, reacting probably is a better word for Mars, because Mars is reactive. It's not a responder, it's a reactor. The way, people are tuning into that vibration, it's kind of mind-boggling. There are some good things that are coming out of it, because a lot of things are being revealed, and there's a lot of truths, coming home, so to speak. But within that, we also need to discern and just be very, very careful about the information that's being spewed out of people's mouths, because I've just never seen such an insatiable social media, I don't even know what to call it, just millions of people, literally from all around the globe, just spewing out just things about others, that in most cases would not really stem from truth. Just need to be careful in what we are taking as gospel. Best way to do that is to use critical reasoning skills, be objective, and do your own research. And detach. All right, see you guys soon. Bye for now.